What up, YouTube? Today we're going to make a control node tutorial in the Godot game engine. This is the game from Lumosity. This is one of their brain training games. I'm just going to use this as a template. We're going to make basically this style of menu screen so you can see exactly how you would do this. We have 2 buttons, 3 buttons, and 2 lines of text. And I'm going to replicate most of this in Godot with no imported assets. So let's do this. Okay. You can see I have my empty project. We're going to start with control node. It is set to full rect, which they are by default when you start a new scene with a control node. This is, I said it was an empty project. I'll notice there's one thing here, this hack regular font. This is actually the default font of the engine that it uses everywhere in the editor. And when you load things, label nodes by default will have this hack regular as the font. Unfortunately, you can't edit the size of those fonts, so to make this screen I went and looked up the default font so that I knew I was using the in editor, the same font that the engine uses. Anyway, let's make this menu. So the first thing we want is a background, and you could do a texture rect. In general, we are just going to use a color rect because this is just a prototype type thing. So let's just name that background so that we know it's why it's there. And we'll change the color. What did we have? We had like a sky blue color as the background. Something like that. And that takes up everything. That was full. Okay, so now we want to add we have 2 lines of text that we're going to want. So let's add a VBox container. And this, we want to put, say, top wide, I guess. Inside this VBox container, we're going to put 2 label nodes. So create that. Add child node, label. Okay, these are going to be the game text or title. And then this is going to be the description. Okay, so these are each going to have size dependent on the size of the label. And here we're going to put title, game, title. And we want the text to be aligned center. And then let's do the same thing for the description. Like this is a brief description of the game objective. And we want this to be centered as well. And this is the point where we realize, oh hey, these are really tiny and this is inappropriate for a menu, and we want to make this text bigger. So we're going to go down to theme overrides, fonts, font. In this box, we need to add a new dynamic font. So when we do this, you notice the text goes away because we haven't supplied the font information yet. So we go down to the font. In the font data, we're just going to drag hack regular. And now we can see that the description line is larger than the game title line. And if we go into settings, that's because it's now size 16. And we use filter to make it a little more clear. So we're going to do the same thing for the game title. Theme overrides, font, new dynamic font, open the new dynamic font, go into font data, drag in hack regular, and go to settings, and we're going to bust this up a little bit because we want the game title to really pop. 24 is good enough. Use a filter, and now we can go into the extra spacing here. under the font, but I don't think that's what we want to do. Line spacing is probably something to change, and then we can go to the title and just add some space this way. Another way that we could add space inside of a VBox container is to just add a child node with a color rect and make this color rect transparent. Just take the alpha to 0, and then let's see, we want to move it, whoops, move it up, and then go to the rect min size and change the, let's see, the Y value to something like 24. And that will also put a space between our text. So there's lots of different ways to manage where the space is on your label nodes and inside of your containers. We can also, because this container is the first container, it's not inside of another container, we can actually just change the size of the box and move it to where we want. You'll notice even though the anchor is up here, we can still move this top box. If we put another container inside of this, then we would not be able to manually change its margins like this, because the VBox container itself would control that. So the general tip here, if you're confused about containers and how to manage your screen space, is the elements inside the container, you can always change their min rect size to guarantee that they take up a certain amount of space. So I could put like 64 here, and oh, that's not, sorry. That was the value it was to begin with. Let's put 200 to make it a larger difference. You can do that to change, to put in empty space as well. There's lots of options here, but for now, that is all we need for the labels. So, okay, that's one VBox container, and it goes to about the middle. That's good, whatever. Close it. We're done with that. Now, we're going to add another child node. This is going to be an HBox container, and we are going to set it to be center wide. Where is center wide? H center wide. And we're going to drag its margin down to about here. We don't want it to go all the way down because we're not going to put the mute button inside of this container. We could do that as well, but I think this is a little bit easier. Okay, so this is our HBox container. It might overlap a little bit with the VBox container, but that doesn't really matter. We're going to put in our buttons. Add child node button. I'm just going to do a normal base button here. Duplicate that. Now we want them to be in the middle of the screen, so in the HBox container we need alignment to be set to center. And notice that they take up the entire box. We can do that by, we can shorten them by changing the HBox container, the size of this itself. We can also change their rect size here. Although this is really only useful if the container is trying to make them smaller. And in this case, that's not what we have. We can force that. We could say close the container. So I guess this is its minimum size. It's the button's minimum size. No? Well, whatever. That's the minimum size of the button. We can give it a bigger minimum size and say 32, and now it's a little bit bigger. And notice I changed one of them and it changed both of them. This one does not have the minimum size set to 32, but it was changed because it's inside of the HBox container, and when I changed the minimum size of the first one, it forced the HBox container to be larger than it wants to be. Notice the HBox container has no minimum size. We probably want one. Let's put 24. So that's just a little note. Alright, back to making our buttons. So the default button class has text. You can put, this is the how to play button, and this is the play button. We can do this with default text on a default button, but I think it usually you want to have a little more control over how your text looks, and so you can also just add a label node onto these. Let's do that for both. Actually, let's do it for one and not for the other, so we can compare how they look. So the first thing is go to this label node and put it at full rect so that it expands the size of its parent, which is the button. We can go to this one, since we're not going to use the label node. What we want to do is change its minimum size in the X direction to be like 64 maybe. That's a decent size. Let's go a little bit bigger. No, it needs to at least be the size of the other one. What is this? What is this rect size? 87. Okay, so I was going to do 88. I should have gone with my gut. And let's say this one's 88 too, just so they're even. Okay, so our buttons are the same size now, regardless of what their text says. And we need one more element to complete our menu, and this is another button. This is going to be the, whoops, this should not be here. Let's just delete that. Control node. Add to the child of the control node so that it is outside of the containers, and we can anchor it to the bottom right down here, and then we want to just move it a little bit off of the anchor and stretch it out a little bit, and we can just go ahead and manipulate this one directly. We don't have to worry about min rect size or anything because it's not inside of a container, although it's probably still best practice to set a minimum size. So it shouldn't be 88, let's go 80. Want it to be a little bit smaller. And then when our change forces the button outside of the screen, because that's what the blue line there is, we can just go to the layout and click bottom right again to anchor it, just to make sure that it's properly anchored. That's usually a good idea. I think that's all we need, aside from the text that says mute sound. Okay. Something like that. Alright, let's give some color to these buttons. Let's actually start with the mute sound one, because this is the easiest. We're going to use the theme overrides. Styles. We want to check this one, this one, this one. No, actually, I guess we got to do all of them except for disabled. For the hover, we need a new style box flat. For pressed, we need a new style box flat. Focus wants a style box empty, and normal wants a style box flat. And I'll explain why focus has empty in a second. So let's set our style box. This is what we want it to look like. It should be black by default. Maybe not that black. There we go. And maybe a little transparent. No. That's the hover state that's going to be transparent. Okay, so it says mute sound. We want to change the corner radius, because that is what we're trying to mock up originally. Had these nice rounded corners, and that's all you have to do to get those nice rounded corners. You just theme overrides styles, make a style box flat, and boom. any control node that has a panel background like this should have this type of theme override. I haven't tested them all, but all of the ones I have tested were like that. And so that's good for the normal state. Now what about the hover state? So the hover state should also be black. Boom. And this one we want a little bit transparent. That way when it's hovered it'll be noticeable. Whoops. But we also have to make sure that the corner radius gets rounded here. And we also need to make sure that the pressed state should look like the hover state, I believe. So it should be pretty much black with just a little bit of alpha reduction there. So it's a little transparent. Okay. Rounded corners, normal, normal. Oh, here we go. This one needs to have rounded corners. 12, 12, 12, 12. Just so they match. This could be a different value to be more rounded. You can also play with the corner detail. It says the corner detail value sets the number of vertices used to round the corner, and if your corner radii is less than 30, a value between 8 and 12 on the corner detail should be good. So I'm less than 30, 8 corner detail, we in business. Okay, so that's the mute sound button, or at least the basic element of it. We're going to now change the how to play and the play buttons in the same way. So we go to the theme override, styles, normal, hover, pressed, and focus. And again, we have a style box flat. This is a style box empty, style box flat, style box flat. And we're going to go ahead and do the same thing here, just so we don't have to. Oh, this is wrong. That was on the label. So you notice the label doesn't have that panel, the style background. This one's the empty one, style box flat, style box flat. Okay, so if we look in the, if we're on the how to play button, the normal should be empty. You can be completely transparent on this. And now it looks like the play button is overriding it. Oh, it's overriding the label. The label is supposed to be full rect. What happened here? The button size is smaller than the label size. That I do not understand. Did I set the minimum size? I did. I set the minimum size of the label to be 88. Yeah. Instead of setting the minimum size of the button. So that's something you gotta watch for. Now it looks right. Okay. So let's go back down to the styles. And we need the corner radius again. This is the same. I just used 12 for all of these. I played around with 15. It looks pretty good too. So our border, we're going to put a border on this one. Whoops. And the border, I did it again. Border width, we do 1 or 2 maybe. And now we have a nice outline. Oh, this isn't really rounded. That's more of a rectangle. Okay, so our Y value is a little high. Maybe we should make this 24. Uh-oh. 24. So now they're both, yeah, that looks better. It's a little scrunched in there on the text. Maybe that, wait, didn't I override this? I did not override this. This is the default. Oh, I see what I did wrong. I see what I did wrong. I put the label there and didn't even use it. So that should be centered. Centered. And that's pretty good, I guess. And this is what should have the font override. I'm just doing the same thing as I did earlier. And the settings, that's way too big. What are you doing to me? I just filter it. It looks a little bit better, I guess. 12. As I can see, our label has gotten bigger than our button again. A little bit bigger in the anchors too. Okay. Okay, so this looks pretty good. And let's look at the orange button, the play button. So I want it to be orange. I'm not really sure what the default color was. It was kind of a light orange, wasn't it? Something like this. That's not bad. Yeah, that's probably good enough. The corner radius again, we got 12, 12, 12, 12. And there's no border on this one. But what we need to do is go to the hover state and make this basically the same shade of orange, but darker. Darker. Maybe darker. That seems pretty good. That should be, yeah, that looks pretty good. And we gotta change the corner radius here. Now realistically, if you knew ahead of time that you were gonna be making a tutorial on something like this, you should probably have thought, hey, I'm gonna go in and save this corner radius thing and all these inputs that I have to set the same for every goddamn button. Yeah, maybe I should have done that beforehand and saved it as a resource so that I could just load it easily. But not everybody is the greatest planner, Ted. So this is what we have. So now we're going to do the pressed. The pressed state needs to be exactly the same, basically, as the hover state, because you don't want it to look different. Unless you do, but I think in this case we probably don't. Normally, a play button isn't going to have a pressed state in the first place, and as soon as you press it, it's going to load another scene, and so you're not going to see this state, or you shouldn't see this state, but it could happen. Maybe there's a glitch, maybe something doesn't load, so it's good to have a backup. So we have that, we have our style box empty. Oh, we need to do the hover behavior on the how to play button. And that is here. So this one also should have a all white border. And the width needs to be 2. Because that's what we had for the other one, and the corner radius needs to be 12 to match everything else. And here our color should be mostly transparent, a little gray. Something like this maybe? Let's see. Something like that, I think. Yeah. So okay, let's look at this. We got a game title, we got the description, we got our buttons. Let's see how they look when we fire up this scene. Oh, we have to save the scene. Main. And let's load it. Okay. So we've got our scene, we've got hover behavior that looks pretty good. If I click this, uh-oh, I didn't set the pressed. This is why you got to set the pressed state. I set it here. I set it to be the same as hover, so you don't notice when I'm holding that it's pressed. I didn't do it there. That looks fine though. That one doesn't look weird because the hover state overrides when you, yeah. But this one I forgot to do. Also, probably we should override the separation distance. Let's go ahead and do that. Inside the HBox container, we're going to do a theme override on the separation distance. I think by default it's usually 4. You just put it, 8. 8's good. It looks a little bit better. So we go into the button, and which one do we want? We want the press state. Pressed. The border has to be white, and the border width is 2. And let's go to the hover state and copy that background color. There that is. And I had intended to set up the mute sound as a toggle, but it looks like I'm running out of time here, so we're going to call this a done project. Hover behavior, click, doesn't look weird. Yeah, so there we go. I hope if you followed this, you learned a bit about containers and control nodes and all the various different parameters that you have to tweak everywhere. Oh, the one thing that I forgot to mention, I'll do this real quick. Why does focus have a style box empty in it? Because otherwise, when you're running the game, one of the buttons on screen at all times will have a little rectangle around it for accessibility reasons for people who don't have a mouse. Of course, if you want accessibility, you're not just going to want to turn your focus into an empty box, but in our case, we just wanted to show off somebody else's idea. They didn't care about accessibility, so why should we? Yeah. But that's the reason for putting the style box empty in the focused theme override for all of the buttons, so that there wasn't a rectangular outline around one of the buttons. Another option would have been to just make it have rounded corners, I guess, and not made it empty. But it's still, you have to override the focused state as well. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed it.